Welcome to our 5-minute Bible study in the book of Revelation. Today we are ready to begin Revelation chapter 17, which actually begins the next section of the book of Revelation, a section that includes really the remainder of the book. And this section revolves around comparing and contrasting two great cities. So as we move from chapter 17 through the end of the book, we're going to see two sections that form, or two parts that form this section about two great cities. One is the city of Babylon, and the other is the city of Jerusalem. The city of Babylon represents society opposed to God, or in rebellion against God, and what all that means and what that entails, and the judgment that will come. And the city of Jerusalem represents the city of God, those who follow the Lamb, those who are the community of God's people, and the coming redemption and glory of what it means to be Jerusalem. And so in these chapters, we're going to see this comparison, this contrast between the way of Babylon and the way of Jerusalem. This section of Revelation is really a tale of two cities. A tale of two cities, to borrow from Charles Dickens. Babylon and Jerusalem. Now, we first look at Babylon. That's what begins chapter 17. And this follows what we saw last time, which was the pouring out of the bowls of wrath, the completion of God's judgment. And we saw especially in the seventh bowl, the preparation for this description of Babylon and how she will fall. Because you remember in the seventh bowl, it was the finality of God's judgment, and the statement was made that Babylon will fall. Babylon will be judged. This was the second time Babylon had been mentioned. We saw a few chapters back the angelic announcement that Babylon will fall. And now the seventh bowl said, it's happened. And so as we get to chapter 17, we begin to get some detail upon how God will judge Babylon and how she will fall. Now notice how the vision begins. John says, one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, come, and I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits by many waters. With her the kings of the earth have committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries. The name written on her forehead is Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. So this great figure, this woman that John sees is a prostitute, but she's also Babylon. Now, why Babylon? Why Babylon? Why is she described as Babylon? You will recall, of course, that in the Old Testament, Babylon was the great enemy of God's people. It was Babylon under the king Nebuchadnezzar who invaded the land in the early part of the 6th century BC and destroyed Jerusalem and destroyed the temple and destroyed the people and carried the people into exile. And for 70 years, they languished in exile in Babylon until God redeemed them and brought them out. But in their mind, of course, Babylon is the enemy of God's people. And of course, it actually even goes back further than that in the Old Testament, back to the book of Genesis, to the Tower of Babel. You remember that story of the Tower of Babel when human society said, we can organize apart from God. We can build a tower that reaches to heaven. We don't need God. We'll be gods ourselves. And of course, you remember God confused their language. It was a Babel. But the Tower of Babel, that city became Babylon, the great enemy of God. So when John sees society as opposed to God, or society in rebellion against God, he says that is Babylon. And so in his vision, he sees the punishment upon the human state or the human society or humanity when we try to organize our life as if we don't need God, as if we can build our own tower to heaven. In John's mind, that of course is prostitution, spiritual prostitution. Because see, we're meant to be allied with God. We are meant to be the bride of the Lamb. That's what the New Testament says. And when we worship other gods, when we worship the state or human society, try to build our own Tower of Babel, that is spiritual adultery or spiritual prostitution. And so that's what John sees. He says, I saw the city. The world thought it was great, Babylon. Well, I saw it was a great prostitute, and I saw that judgment was about to fall. Okay, next time we'll look a little more in detail at this judgment and what it means. But right now we see that in this life, we have two choices. We can live as either as citizens of Babylon, or we can live as citizens of Jerusalem, the people of God. Our choice, of course, is to live as the people of God. Babylon will fall. That Tower of Babel always does. But Jerusalem has an eternity with God. So let us live as citizens of Jerusalem, the holy city, the people of God. All right, next time we'll continue looking at chapter 17, a little more detail, because John has a lot to say about this judgment that is going to fall on Babylon. But we'll take that up again next time. You have a great day today. Live as people of Jerusalem, people of the city of God, and know that His protective grace is always on you. I'll see you next time.